I initially hadn't planned on talking about White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer's Hitler mishap because this is a story that the media has beaten like a dead horse. And so, it's so redundant. They talk about it time and again. However, there's a component of the story that I think is important that nobody else is really talking about, so I wanted to address that because I think that with this mishap, it gives us some insight into the true intentions of the Trump White House. So for those of you who haven't seen this yet, all two of you, this is what happened.
We didn't use chemical weapons in World War II. You had someone as despicable as Hitler who didn't even sink to using chemical weapons.
Someone as despicable as Hitler didn't even sink to using chemical weapons. I mean, the level of stupidity that he's exhibiting here is just downright offensive. Like, I'm literally offended that someone working in the White House is this stupid, is this ignorant of a fact about World War II that we learn in elementary school. So he's an idiot, and of course, this is what he had to say to defend himself.
I made a mistake. There's no other way. There's no other way to say it. I got into a topic that I shouldn't have, and I screwed up.
So for me personally, I don't have that much faith in Sean Spicer. I think that there's a possibility that he didn't make a mistake. I think he may have just been historically ignorant about World War II and whether or not Hitler used chemical weapons. So I'm not convinced that he misspoke. I think he may just be ignorant. However, with this presumed Freudian slip, I guess we'll call it, I think that it really gives us some insight into something ominous about the Trump White House. So Trump is resorting to pro-war propaganda, and what he likely communicated to his staff, including Sean Spicer, is that we need to do any and everything right now to vilify Assad in an effort to drum up support for the inevitable invasion into Syria. So, the goal isn't necessarily to be factual. The goal is to make sure that we do things to invoke World War II era patriotism. Because, if we frame Bashar al-Assad as a threat that's as dangerous as Hitler, or maybe even worse, then we're obligated to invade Syria and put an end to the suffering. Basically, in trying to demonize Assad, which, he should be demonized because he's a bad guy. I don't think anyone will really object to that statement. But by trying to invoke Hitler and compare him to Hitler, you're trying to plant this seed in Americans. It's very manipulative. You want them to think, well, if he's as bad as Hitler, maybe we should take action. They want you to envision human rights atrocities on the scale of World War II. If you think about the suffering of German Jewish people, then how could you not act? You're a bad guy if you didn't want to fight Hitler. So that's what they're trying to do. But Donald Trump, he's saying right now that we're not going to invade Syria, but he wants to invade Syria after seeing how popular it made him. However, this is what he wants to do. If you could drum up public support for another invasion by doing pro-war propaganda, well, you could say, you know what, my hands are tied. I was elected by the American people, and I am compelled to do the will of the American people, and the American people clearly want me to invade Syria and bomb Syria, so that's what I'm going to have to do. Now, let's not talk about how we manipulated the American people just like we did to get them to support the Iraq War. Let's not talk about that. All we want them to do right now is to react emotionally. We want them to put facts aside, and we want them to think that Assad is a World War II level threat, just like Hitler was. But what they don't want to tell you about is if you really care about Syrian lives, if you are worried about humanitarianism, well, if you bomb another country, if you start a war with another country, that will cause more death and destruction than if we just leave it alone. And furthermore, if you wanted to attack Assad, why didn't you do an independent investigation? It's because they don't want to know the truth. They're afraid to find out the truth because then that might go against the narrative. They want to invade Syria. They want to invade Iran. So they're looking for any and all reasons to justify an invasion of this war with a country that never attacked us. So, yes, it is the case that this was a mishap from Sean Spicer and he's an idiot. But I think that we have to kind of read a little bit more into it because I really feel as though there's something more ominous behind Sean Spicer's mishap. He felt pressured by Donald Trump to really drum up support for the war, and this is part of that. So the main takeaway is that We already know that Assad is a bad guy. I think he's an objectively bad person. However, so was Saddam Hussein, so was Gaddafi. But what happened when we overthrew those dictators? We put those countries in worse situations that allowed the manifestation of terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, ISIS. We now have a strong ISIS presence in Libya. So we need to learn our lesson that when you do regime change, you just make what matters worse. So getting involved is not the right move right now. I don't trust our government to go in and not just kill a bunch of civilians either. So, they're looking for any and all reasons to justify war, and I really want you guys to be vigilant, be hypersensitive to them, read more into things than you typically do, because what they're doing right now is trying to manipulate you. The media is doing it, the politicians are doing it, they want war, and we have to be vigilant against their efforts to do propaganda.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.